Hello, everyone. Guillaume Lesuel here, host of the E-commerce Wizards podcast, where I feature leaders in e-commerce and business. Today's guest is Chris Mercer. He prefers to go by the name Mercer. He's a co-founder of MageMontreal.io. He's a marketing expert, and as you may guess by the company name, well, an expert in measurement marketing. So today we'll be talking about what should we measure in an e-commerce store to be more successful. And Mercer has a framework that he'll be presenting us today. So before we get started, our sponsorship message, this episode is brought to you by MageMontreal. If a business wants a powerful e-commerce online store that will increase their sales, or to move piled up dormant inventory to free up cash reserves, or to automate business processes to gain efficiency and reduce human processing errors, our company, MageMontreal, can do that. We've been helping e-commerce stores for over a decade. Here's a catch. We're specialized and only work on the Adobe Magento e-commerce platform. We do everything Magento. If you know someone who needs design, development, maintenance, a new site, we got their back. Email our support team, support@MageMontreal.com, or go to MageMontreal.com. That's MAGE Montreal.com. All right, Mercer, happy to have you here today.
Thanks, Guillaume. Pleasure being here. Thanks for having me.
Can you please tell a bit our audience about you so they know more about your background and your expertise?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually started in the whole online adventure. You know, my background primarily is sales and marketing. I've really just done a lot of sales management. That was sort of my main background in the offline sort of analog world. We moved online, like a lot of people do, to sort of creating an online business. We did, in this case, we started with WordPress training and helping people learn how to build WordPress sites. That led us very quickly, as you know, being an agency yourself, into like, hey, can you just build this for us? It's a little harder to do it. So we started building out websites. And we wanted to get into CRO because CRO was, at least back then in the day, was kind of new-ish.
Yeah, conversion rate optimization.
Exactly, conversion optimization. And we wanted to differentiate ourselves. And so we're like, oh, okay, we're going to build the site, then we're going to help you optimize it, right? Very similar to what your agency does. And then it was a matter of, well, in order to optimize, you must first measure. So of course, that meant setting up Google Analytics, et cetera, et cetera. So what we realized very, very quickly years ago was we would present these sites to clients and we were like, oh, here's the site, blah, blah, blah. And then here's in Google Analytics how you can tell how many leads you're getting, or which traffic source is causing which sale, or which stage of the customer journey, or all this other stuff that we just thought everybody did. Turns out very few people do that because they get confused by these tools. They can be a little overwhelming. And so we had clients almost overnight when we started doing that. Instead of recommending other clients to do websites, we were getting things like, oh, we already have a site, but such and such told us that you set up their analytics, and could you do that for our site? And then we realized, okay, that's the pivot. People don't know how to use these tools. They don't know how to think about measurement. There's a lot of overwhelm out there. There's a lot of data and information, and we certainly don't need more of that. We need more story. And so our mission became, and that's why we created MageMontMarketing.io, was to help marketers figure out how to use all these cool tools, because they're really not that hard, but you do need a framework. You need a step-by-step system to go through.
Yeah, exactly. And your framework has those 3 steps here, and each of the 3 steps subdivided into 3 more. So it's sort of a 9-step system. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the measurement marketing framework really is 3 key steps. The first is plan. It's a thing that everybody skips, actually, in most cases. And we'll come into the individual components of each one in just a second. So first, you plan things out. Then, and only then, you build things out. And then normally what people start is they start in the build. They turn on Google Analytics, or they turn on an integration somewhere, and all of a sudden there's information in Google Analytics and they start playing around with it. And it's not at all ready yet because they haven't really planned for it. So it's first plan, then you build, then you use Google Analytics and things like that. Then you act upon what you've built. That's where you finally start looking at the reports to figure out information. So that's really the 3 simple steps there: is plan, build, and then you act. So in the planning stage, you mentioned there's these sort of 3 components to each one of these. In the planning stage, the 3 core components, first is you have to list out what questions that you are trying to get answers to. So you just list them out. Kind of think about this like 3 columns if you want. So it's like first column, you list out all the different questions that you're trying to get answers to. The second column right next to that is what information will I need to collect in order to get those answers? And you're thinking about what you're going to have to measure for in order to get those answers, or what somebody in your team is going to have to do. And then next to that, and this is the most important step of all of this, is actions. So first you think about questions you're going to answer. Then you think about how you're going to answer them, by what information you need. Then you're going to think about what actions will I take based upon the answers I get. And this is kind of the formula here is like if this, then that, so it's like, if my opt-in rates are less than 25%, I'll do this. If they're more than 35%, I'm going to do that, right? Something along those lines. So that's the planning stage. As you think about questions, you think about the information, then you think about what the actions are that you're going to take based upon the answer you get. I cannot emphasize how important that action step is. And we'll come back to this just a little bit here. So once you've got your plan in place, you now have a measurement plan in place, then you go build. And that's where you're using maybe a tool like Google Tag Manager, Google Analytics, or Google Data Studio, Adobe, right? To get in there and build out the measurement to make sure that now you are collecting the information so that you can get answers to the questions that you are planning to get answers to, right? So that's what that is. And it starts with really first identifying the traffic and making sure that whatever the measurement platform is that you're using knows the who, what, and why of your traffic. So who's sending you the traffic? What type of traffic are they sending you? Why are they sending the traffic in the first place? What are you trying to accomplish? Then right next to that is the results. And you think about, okay, making sure that the measurement platform understands what results you're trying to achieve, right? So first it's traffic, then it's results. Then finally, you do that in a way, you structure it in a way so that it tells a story. And that's a little bit, it can get it a little, that's where the technical stuff will come in a little bit. And it depends upon the platform itself. But this is where when you properly use these platforms, it will tell a story of which traffic sources are causing which results. And then now you've got something that's a story, not a bunch of information, not a bunch of data. And if anyone's ever jumped into a report and they go, I have no idea what this means, that what's happened is there was probably no plan for it in the first place. And they just started building without a plan. And that's why, and it wasn't used properly. And that's why that's why it looks like that bunch of information.
Yeah. And that's the step where stuff starts to be exciting, because then you can see, okay, my Google ads gives me that much traffic and it costs me that much per sale. And you can see, let's say my Facebook ad, it's different. Sometimes it changes from business to business, which one will work better. But it's okay, my Facebook ad, maybe it costs me a little bit more, but actually the conversion is better and it's more profitable for that specific market.
Yep,
so
100%.
Stuff starts to be interesting there.
That's exactly right, because there's a story, right? And that brings us to that third step, which is the act, right? So first we do planning, then you do the build out, then you act. And that's where you actually now look at the reports, because they do tell you a story. They make more sense. Maybe it's a report in Google Analytics or Adobe. Maybe it's a report in Data Studio or Telium or sorry, not Telium, some other platform, right? That's out there for dashboarding. And so Tableau is the one I was thinking of. So you have all of these different options now. So to read a story, to actually see back there and read it, like I liken it to a kid's book. Your reports should be that easy to read. So it's just obvious what's happening. Now, once you've got your benchmarks, because you've got that story in hand, you then move to forecast. This is the other thing a lot of businesses skip, which is a shame. And I think a lot of times because they don't realize they can't. But you can forecast based on trends and patterns that are happening. You can then forecast based upon your recent past what the near future is going to look like. So you know kind of what to expect for the opt-in rates. You can, instead of saying like, what just happened to all that money we spent on Facebook, you start saying, here's what's going to happen with that 100 grand we're going to spend next week on Facebook. Here's how many impressions we're going to get. Here's what the click-through rate's going to be. Here's what the page loads are going to be. Here's how many people are going to opt in. Here's how many people those are going to buy within 7 days at X amount to create the money that we're going to create and attribute back to Facebook. So there is this, it's another way of planning, but as you're planning for the future now, the forecast it's all about. And then at that point, all you need to do is just measure against your forecast, because you've already got the measurement system built. Now it's just using your forecast and measuring against it. And very quickly, you will see that very important step that everybody tries to race to, which is optimize, right? What do I need to adjust? What actions should I be taking, to make things better? The optimization step becomes so apparent and so obvious because you measure against it and you'll see, oh, well, that 10 grand we spent on Facebook, we thought was going to give us 100,000 impressions. It only gave us 10,000 impressions. So clearly that's where it went wrong. Or everything worked well, through the opt-in rate, but the email didn't perform the way it was supposed to perform. So our sales weren't there or whatever the thing was. But you will very clearly see where the conversation sort of dropped off. And that will tell you as a marketer, here's what I need to do to actually fix it.
I agree with this. If someone's not an experienced senior web marketer and he just jumps in, typically he'll go and jump into the build, make sure the Google Analytics is integrated, and then right away to just looking at the result and trying to optimize immediately, sort of skipping all those steps.
That's exactly
gives
right.
You the structure there, because then you look at it and say, okay, well, I had that 10,000 visitors, let's say from Google. Okay, cool. And another 10,000 from my ads. Okay, cool. And conversion rate was not too bad. And bounce rate was not too bad. Okay. And what do I do with that now? So
that's exactly right. It's 100% right. You're splashing around in a bunch of data and information. You're not quite sure what it's telling you, but you write a blog post that said bounce rate should be this. And so you're like, well, I guess we do that. Right. But there was no plan.
Yeah. There's a difference between having data and having insight from that data, what you should do with it.
Right. And stories is what give you insight. Just like every story's got a moral, right? Like your little action, the three bears, you read that story, you learn something about not breaking into other people's homes. And it's kind of the same thing with data. It can absolutely tell you a story.
Yeah, cool. All right, so we covered the base of the framework here, the 9 steps of that framework. Now, let's say, what are the most frequent mistakes, and we partially covered this, but I'm sure you have more, that you've seen e-commerce store owner do when it comes to measurement and marketing?
Definitely in the planning. That's where everything goes wrong. Number one, skipping it, which is the biggest mistake, no matter what, is if you do not have a plan for something, you immediately stop. Do not jump into Google Analytics. Do not look at Facebook Ads Manager. Don't do anything until you have a plan for what you're about to do. So that's the very, very first one. In planning, though, there's a series of missteps that can happen. So the things to watch out for is when you think about questions, this is a popular thing that we get asked all the time, is like, which questions should I be asking for? And you know as well as I do that you can Google for this and say, what are the important questions that an e-commerce store owner should be asking? And you will have 27 million blog posts with the 7 questions that everything, or the 3 questions, or the 15 questions, or the 27 questions you should be asking. And at the end of the day, you have hundreds and hundreds of possible questions, all of which somebody else asked, and they seem to be contradictory. And at the end of the day, I am not a fan of that. So when it comes to questions, I am a big fan of frameworks and keeping things as simple as possible. Because simple is where the solution, it almost always is. Solutions are not in complex things, they're in simple things. So when you think about the questions, there are only 2 types of questions you need to ask. It's a question either around what results you're getting, or it's a question around how you're getting those results. And if you just do that and you start with where you are, and I know that sounds a little maybe too simple, but it's important because there's a lot of things that, especially if you're as your company grows, you start joining other groups and other masterminds, and you're hanging out with other business owners or other CMOs, and they're all saying, "Oh, we do this or we do that," and you think like, "Oh, I must have to do that now." Just because they can doesn't mean you can. Their measurement system might be better, so they can ask bigger questions than you can right now based on your system. So when you think about results and how with the questions, you start with where you are. So it might just be like, "Hey, we don't know like how many." Not the case, but let's pretend it is. We don't know how many sales we're making. Okay, well then that's what we need to do. We need to figure out how many sales we're actually selling, how many products, what the average product rate is, what the average order cart value is. Get the basics in place. But immediately after the results sort of things, like what's the end result of all of this marketing we're doing? How did we get that result? Should be the immediate next style question you start asking. So you're like, well, what does that mean? Well, that means how many people started the checkout to actually finish that checkout? How many people actually added to cart in order to get to the checkout? How many people actually saw product views to get
I
to
believe here an important discussion about what you're saying is a lot of store owners, especially, like, okay, I have my data. There's 1,000 people who started the checkout, 100 finished. What do I do with that information?
Right.
You know?
Right. That's it. That's exactly right. And so you want to, and that's where the story is, right? And these results and how style questions is that's where you start figuring out the story. Because imagine if you knew, oh, well, X amount of people that come to a product detail page view, there's going to be X amount of people that are going to add to cart. There's going to be X percentage of those that are going to go to the checkout. X percentage of those make it through for an average order cart value of. Now you can start predicting out what your revenues are going to be, right? You can start forecasting trends and patterns. Which is a very important phrase. So the truth is in the trend, the power is in the pattern. I think people get caught up in numbers too much and they miss out on trends and patterns. So that's an important thing. So, going through that results and how, when you think about your questions, if you're just starting out, get the basics in place and don't worry about anything else. At a certain point, you will start asking bigger questions because you can. An example of a bigger question might be, okay, well, we've got people coming into our store. We want to know what a new contact is or a new customer is worth on day 0 when they first purchase, 7 days later, 14 days later, 30 days later, 60 days later, 90 days later. Yes, you can get answers to that, right? Yes, it is possible to measure for that, to get that sort of velocity of return when it comes to maybe a particular people coming in from Facebook or from Google Ads or something else. But it's more complicated, right? Your measurement system has to be improved dramatically sometimes to get those sort of answers. And that's where it's like, well, if your measurement system isn't built to answer the questions that you're planning for, right? You're just going to get frustrated. You're not going to actually have answers and you're going to feel like you have no idea what's going on. So you start with where you are. So results and how, and then you'll get better and better naturally as you go through these steps. These steps that we talked about, this framework, it's not a one and done thing. You go through it over and over and over and over and over again because
Right.
your questions are going to evolve. Your company's going to evolve. Your business is going to grow.
Yeah,
So that's
and we can talk about the example you just gave here. So let's say, why would someone care about that? What's the value on the 0, the 30, 60, and 90? Most likely it's because that company is trying to grow aggressively and wants to invest as much as they can in a proven ad campaign that has a proven return on investment.
Yep.
And they need to know how many days until they make their money back.
Exactly right.
So that they can reinvest again.
100% right. Yep, that's exactly right.
And knowing that you spend, let's say, that 100 grand or 10 grand, whatever it is, in that month, like how fast can you get that money back, or having the confidence that you will get that money back and more within 90 days, let's say.
Yep.
So that you can keep spending the next month. Otherwise, they go 100% and they stop. So,
yes. How many? I mean, we've probably both seen companies that scale themselves out of business because they didn't measure for that sort of when the money was coming back, and they kept going too much into, for example, LTV. It's a poison metric. I hate LTV as a metric, which I know is strong to say because everyone's like, you got to know your LTV. But LTV, by the base definition of lifetime value, which is what this metric is, it changes every day. Right. So any metric that changes all the time and is based upon whatever definition you're using, there's a great blog post out there about how Starbucks can calculate LTV. And it's like 18 different ways they can calculate it. I'm like, it makes it useless, right? Any metric that you can change the definition and get a different result, it's not a metric, right? Math is a thing. 2 + 2 is always 4. And so instead of the reason that LTV doesn't work is because if I said, oh, my lifetime value is $10,000 on a customer. And I'm like, great. Well, then I'm going to spend $3,500 in this advertising campaign to get my $10,000 customer. And then I find out, yeah, but that $10,000 was over 3 years. That's a problem because I just paid $3,500. I'm not going to get my money back in time. I now can't scale. I can't grow because I didn't measure time. And that's why we always call it velocity of return, which is LTV over time, right? It's like, what is my value of a customer at this point, at this point, at this point? These are important questions to eventually ask. Again, I hesitate to mention some of these because it's like some people might not be having the basics in place. If you don't have basics in place, if you don't know how people are moving through your e-commerce store, if you don't know that conversation that's going on between the users and your website, don't even worry about velocity return because you're just not ready for that yet. Get the basics in place first, then you start.
It's slightly more advanced finances, and it works particularly great for subscription-based type of company. Either it's even a service company, could be a managed service plan instead of the break-fix model. If you've never heard of that, it's worth a Google search, or it could just be any kind of normal subscription, because then you can forecast your revenue over a year, over 2 years, and monthly, you know what's your cash flow. And then you can say, okay, I'm willing to spend, let's say, 6 months of revenue of that customer to acquire it. It's okay if I don't make any money before 6 months, but you've made your calculation and your number that you say it's okay 6 months. Maybe you have venture capital backing you or whatever we had.
Right. And you're measuring to make sure that you were right about that 6 months. And it
exactly.
6 months. Yeah,
exactly. So that there are lots of examples like this. For example, in publicly traded companies like Lightspeed, people are saying, hey, that company is not even profitable. It's a deficit and this and that. This is not true. When you have more advanced finance and knowledge, I know the guys who are working on this. I've seen their presentation with Investissement Quebec and all that. They say it is proven as profitable per cohort. So let's say the 2018 cohort is fully profitable, 2019 cohort is fully profitable. Like that this year, it's not making any money. It's just because they're reinvesting more than they're making. Right. Because they want a future return.
But they're building on a stable foundation that they know is
that they are proving each year is profitable. That cohort of customers is profitable. And now it's okay. We're going to invest an extra 100 million versus what we're actually making this year because we want to make so much more in 2 years.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And when you're thinking about your original question was about what are some of the mistakes or where the missteps are with people, right? So questions, I think that's one of it, is they ask maybe too advanced questions when they don't have a system that can actually give them those answers. So you start with where you are. But the second thing we talk about in this planning sort of step, there was the 3 components of that, which are questions, information, and the actions, right? Information, I think, is a big deal too, because when you think about it, it's like, oh, well, what am I going to need in order to collect? Like, let's say something simple like average cart value. It's like, oh, well, I'm going to need to know the number of sales and the number of total revenue, and I can divide those things out, and that'll figure out average cart value. Pretty simple. But what'll happen is when you get the basics in place, you start asking again bigger questions, and then you start flipping information instead of just the traditional information that you're probably used to thinking about. You realize that what you're really collecting is behaviors on the site. That's where the real magic is. So, for example, on an e-commerce store, as an engagement, you could measure for engagement of a product detail page. So, are people hovering over the product images? Are they clicking on the product images? Are they watching your video? Did they look at your review section for more than 10 seconds? These are all very specific behaviors that are very good signals that show interest and that the user's moving through the customer journey a little further, right? And that they are having a conversation with that page. If you think about the page being a remote salesperson, basically is what it is. And so that you can see that they are engaging, they are having a conversation with the page, and the page is giving them what they need. You can measure for that sort of level of behaviors. And when you see that, or more importantly, if you don't see that, now you know, okay, people are not integrated with or they hover over the images, but they're not spending that much time on product A on those images that they are on product B. Maybe we need to improve the product image, right?
Yeah, so you're doing lead scoring here. You're doing
exactly
lead scoring.
Right.
So like let's say each of those behavior is worth 5 points or 10 points, whatever, and whichever lead has the highest score because they watch more video, downloaded more white papers, more case studies, then maybe it's time for your sales team to do some outreach if it's some big ticket item that is being sold with a sales rep.
100% right. And you can start to forecast, right? And you can say, anybody with a lead score over 5 or over 50 or whatever the metric is, you can say, okay, well, we know they're going to, on average, they're worth 5x. So they need to get that phone call, right, from that salesperson versus just retargeting from a Facebook ad.
Yeah, could be automated.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yep. So that's the other thing. So planning, it's the questions, remember, just results and how is kind of the secret sauce there. Information, it's remembering that don't just think about the numbers, think about behaviors, because that's really what you can measure for. It's not hard to do that. And it's great with a platform like, Magento, you guys said you guys work with, because it's so customizable, right? You can measure practically anything. And then there's that action step, right? That third little part of planning is actions. Like, what actions will I take? Again, the biggest mistake is people don't think that through first. But it's very important to do that. So with actions, when you think about the actions ahead of time, this is before you open up Google Analytics, before you look at a dashboard or anything like that, you think about, okay, what would this report look like when I magically get it? And then how would I use it? What actions would I actually take based upon the answers the report gets? And say, well, the report for some people, it might be a spreadsheet because they're numbers people and they naturally integrate with that sort of report and it's comfortable for them. So they want a spreadsheet that shows data tables. And if this number does this, then they would say, oh, well, again, using opt-in rate as an example or something. If the opt-in rate is less than 25%, I know that if this is cold traffic, that something's off, maybe with the targeting or they're above the fold. We can make some choices on that. If it's above 35 or 40%, let's look at the targeting because maybe we're not scaling out enough because there is such a thing as too good of a conversion rate. And so we can maybe expand that out a little bit. We might have some opportunities there. And so you're thinking about all of this, and maybe it's a pie chart, or maybe it's a thumbs up and thumbs down. There's lots of different things. You can do anything with measurement. So you can make it, I have a friend of mine calls it stick figure simple when it comes to reports. That's what he wants. He just wants a dashboard. It's like up or down. Like, I need to know, what do I need to do? It doesn't have to be a data table always. But when you think about the actions, the other thing that's important about that is not only does it help you to plan out the report, especially if you're in a larger organization and it's your job to create the reports, the marketing department keeps telling you that they want, and then you give them the reports and the marketers don't use it because they're like, I don't know what this means. So, which happens a lot. And the reason that's happening is because there was no plan. There was no plan on what to do with it. So you help them. You think that through and you say, for example, we had a company that was learning all about Google Analytics and measuring email, and they were using UTMs, right, to do this. It's a little super easy thing. Anybody can Google for Google Analytics UTMs. You'll see what I'm talking about. But it helps you to identify the traffic coming into so that a platform like Analytics knows about it. So they were setting this whole thing up, and we always have them come up with a plan first before they actually do the build, of course. And they had planned out so that in their emails, they would know which paragraph number, so paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, that the email, that the link was on, that person clicked on when they came through. And so I said, okay, so I get what you did here. So let's think this through. In 6 months, when you look at this report or dashboard or whatever it is, and it says, hey, of all the emails you've sent over 6 months, paragraph number 3 is amazing. What do you do with that? And they instantly realized they got caught up in measuring for measuring's sake, which happens a lot when you realize what you can measure, like, let's measure it all, right? Which you don't want to do.
Big brother.
You don't need to do that. It's exactly right. It's like, let's get it all. We figure out what to do with it later. And it's not at all useful to do that. So what they realized was, well, we don't know what paragraph number 3 would mean. I was like, exactly. You won't know what it means. Because does it happen to be because it was a shorter paragraph, or was it a longer paragraph, or did some of the emails not have a paragraph number 3 and weren't included? And like, yeah, okay. So actually we shouldn't even measure for paragraph number 3. Right. Or a paragraph number. I'm like, exactly. You can't use that. So instead, what they did is they said, well, instead we want to know, are PS links, are people clicking in PS links or something like that? It's like, okay, fine. That makes sense because that's something replicatable. That's something you can do. something with and say, well, if they
Yeah.
click on the body copy link versus the image link versus the PS link, is there a difference in who's doing what? So do we do PS links or not? That's the action. Like, yes, we do them, or no, we don't. That makes sense. But now they're measuring for a specific action that they want to take based upon the answer they get to the question they're asking. And that's a very important step. So when you go through planning, it takes time. It's not a 5-minute conversation. And you do get better at it, right? The more that you practice it, but it eliminates so many of the typical problems that we see, or challenges, I should say, that we see when it comes to measurement of results. And the reason that people don't know what's working and what's not is because of that a lot of times. So if there's one piece of advice I would give to anybody, it would be focus on the planning and get really good at planning, because the build becomes a lot easier when you've got a good plan. And then when you do that build properly because of the plan, the actual using of the stuff, right? The acting, when you read the reports and you've got stories and you can forecast and optimize, that becomes just natural. It's a natural extension of a really good.
Yeah, and what you're saying also from a business point of view totally makes sense. It's part of documenting your processes and structuring your company so that you can scale it, and then you can hire a new person. Let's say your marketing person leaves or whatever, that you have your procedures written down. Like, if your marketing report says this, what are the possible cause and what should you do? And this was all documented. It makes the life of your staff so much easier. Doesn't change it once they master the topic. They can add more of those condition and add more subtleties to it. But it's very important, because otherwise you get the report and say, what the heck do I do with that report?
Right,
Okay,
now
nice
what?
report.
Yeah,
Nice report.
exactly. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, I guess. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. In
We'll
fact,
see if we do anything with it, we'll file away. And
yeah, exactly. It ends up being, and somebody's like, oh, I sent it to you. Like, okay, whatever,
and then it's an expense and it's useless.
100%. And so what we do, like and just to emphasize the point that this is, it's a skill like anything else. So in the beginning, it's unknown. You don't know it's even possible. Then you know it's possible, but you don't know how to do it. So you got to learn some skills. So I definitely there's some skill there. But for the last 3 years with our own company, we have reliably predicted out what our results need to be, what our results and how need to be for products. Like, say, for example, our flagship training program is called the Measurement Marketing Academy. We teach people how to do all this. We have by week, a year in advance, by week, how many people should be seeing the page, how many of those should be going to the cart, how many of those will complete the cart at what average rate, right? So we have in there price increases planned out for 6 months from now. We have all this stuff in there. It's a very in-depth forecast, but remember, that's just another way of planning. So we've got our plan set out, and every week our marketing team goes in there and did they hit the numbers they need to hit? And then if not, why? Well, we happen to be pretty good at measurement. So we take it another level. So if they're not hitting the numbers they need to hit, they can diagnose why. They go to the page, and we're a slightly different model. We're not e-commerce. We're more direct response in that case. But they can go to the offer page and they can look at the report, what we call the eyes on the journey report. But it basically shows them, well, here's how many people were loaded an impression of the page. Of those, here's how many people were introduced, which again, think about behaviors. We define that as 10 seconds later. 10 seconds later, this is how many people were still there. So we're looking at measuring that, measures above the fold performance of the page, of how it's doing. Then we measure for interest, right? The next I in our journey is interest. So how many of those were stuck around in this particular page? It's very customized per page. We have a longer form sales copy. So we're measuring for, are they there 45 seconds and did they scroll at least halfway through? That shows interest in the message that we're doing. Then we measure for, did they investigate the offer, the other I? Did they investigate it? So that is, did the pricing table show up for at least 5 seconds where people were considering which option they might want to do, potentially investigating a purchase? And then finally, the final I is initiate. Did they initiate to go to the cart? So if the offer page, for whatever reason, isn't working in the or that funnel, that customer journey doesn't work in the efficiencies that marketing expected it to work in, based on traffic source, whatever else, they can go into the eyes in the journey report, look at a very specific traffic source, maybe an email or Facebook or whatever it was, and see exactly what was the conversation that those users were having with the page. And they might find like, wow, nobody stuck around, introduced. We expect 90% to be introduced, but only 70% were introduced. That means it was a clear above the fold issue. It was a mismatch on the expectation that the ad set probably coming into the page. Page didn't match it and they left. That's the fix. There's nothing else to worry about. Don't worry about the offer. Don't worry about changing the copy. Don't worry about changing the designs unless it's above the fold, right? So we know marketing knows exactly what to do. And there's no drama. There's no guessing. And that's what the best part about measurement for me is that it eliminates the drama. There's just flip that switch and it'll all come back. And then you flip the switch and it all comes back. And so it makes it that's what the beauty of
It's true.
measurement is.
It's
And it gets better and better
powerful
and better.
because on a very basic level, let's say you just do your Google ads. Let's say you connect your Google ads. So then you know your conversion. Let's say you set your conversion simply being to submit the form or something like that. But then if you don't do that more advanced tracking, you'll just be like, okay, my conversion rate sucks. It's 0.5%. And you have no clue why. Do I need to trash the whole copy? Do I need to trash the whole design? Do I need to move everything? Right. So what you're saying is like, okay, well, did they even scroll down to read the copy? Yes or no? And that changes. Okay, I'm going to change the header section, and you know where to focus. And I've seen also lots of marketers, they test the pricing. If the pricing is an issue, also by having the price hidden, it's on page 2. So you have to click like view offer or whatever, it brings you to page 2. There you see the price. So they can measure, was it the price that made people, bounce back or whatever. And that's as a separate measure again. So it's very interesting what you're saying here, because it allows you to fix your, let's say, conversion rate, your Google ads and so on.
It's exactly right. So and again, I love thinking about this sort of stuff in an offline world. Right? Because I'm a believer, like if whatever you're doing digitally works offline, it's probably a decent thing to build on. But if it doesn't work offline, it's probably just a fad, right? So in the offline world, if I had a shoe store, you walked in my shoe store and I was like, hey, what can I help you find? You're like, oh, sorry, I was looking for shirts. And like, okay, just it's next door. The shirt place is next door. You go there. In the digital world, what I would then do is follow you into the shirt store and then ask you to buy shoes over and over again for at least 3 or 4 days, because you showed interest in coming into my shoe store, which is not at all what happened, right? It's not at all what happened. You just accidentally came into the wrong door. But with measurement marketing, you can say, okay, well, let's make sure they were there at least 10 seconds before we start going crazy retargeting. And so we wait 10 seconds, make sure that you're at least familiar, and you go, yeah, okay, I'm in the shoe store. Yeah, I'm looking for sneakers. I go, great. Let's go get some sneakers. And then we have a conversation. What type of sneakers you're looking for? What are you going to use them for? Okay, we got this buy one, get one. If you want to do this, and I'll try to upsell. But it's a natural conversation in the transaction between you and I, right? It's a natural conversation that happens between two people. Online, that same conversation happens, except the salesperson isn't there. It's the website. And in particular, to your point, it's the step that they're on, the specific step in the customer journey that's having a conversation to try to get them from one step to the next step. And then that step gets them to the next step. And then that step is supposed to get them to the next step. And if you measure for that, you will very, very clearly see where the conversation fell off. And then you can, in my head, I think about, like, I train my website. I will go to the offer page and be like, okay, you clearly are kicking, people out for a reason. Let's figure out what's going on and change the script a little bit. As an example for that, we have that Measurement Marketing Academy. It was years ago this happened, but we were measuring. We of course have our forecast. X amount of people are going to go from the offer page to the cart. Typically for us, 8 to 12% go from the offer to the cart. That's what has been like that for years. So that's the number we look for. And our cart was 40% cart through rate, right? So about 60% abandonment rate. So let's say 35 to 45% cart through rate. So we would always measure for this. Well, all of a sudden our numbers, there were some changes that were made to the page. We look at the numbers within a couple of days of traffic, and we go, okay, something's really off. And the problem was, we saw it wasn't 8 to 12% of the people going to the cart page. It was something like 30 to 40% going to the cart. At the same time, cart abandonment skyrocketed, right? So now it's only like 90% of the people are leaving the cart, 10% are actually making it through. So now we go, okay, this is clearly odd, unexpected. It's not matching what our forecasts are, but we know the conversation that's happening with the user is the user's going to the cart without the intention to buy, right? Because if they were going with the intention to buy, we know it's going to be 35 to 45% are going to make it through. So if they're going, why would they go to the cart without the intention to buy? We now know that the offer page is creating a problem. The offer page's script is off. That sales conversation that's happening with the users is not correct. So we go and we look, why is the sales page causing people to go to the cart, but not to buy? And this is what reminded me to tell a story. Forgot to put the price. So the only way they could find the price was to go to the cart, and then they went to the cart, and then they went back to the sales page to see if it was worth it now. Because that's what everybody does, right? You scroll to the bottom and see how much it is, and then you go back up. Okay, let me go justify it now. And that's what was happening. But there was no price. So they had to go to the cart, not with the intention to buy, but the cart is not there to build value. The cart is there to collect the payments. So the cart's like, what are you doing here? And they're like, it's $97. And they're like, all right, well, I guess I'll go back to the sales page and figure out, because the sales page is there to actually educate them on build value. And it was a huge problem. So we immediately saw this in the numbers. It was a simple mistake, and we put processes in place, SOPs, make sure that doesn't happen again. But it was like, okay, let's put the price back where the price needs to be because that got hidden accidentally. And then bam, everything came back in line, 8 to 12%, 35 to 45% at the right volume that we wanted for revenue. And we hit exactly the way we wanted it to work.
And
but
this
we
is
knew because of the numbers to do that.
And this is your own personal number, which is great. Thanks for sharing. And let's say with your customers, what have you seen as like typical numbers roughly or ranges for, let's say, an e-commerce store in terms of how many people should go to the cart and how many people should actually follow through with the purchase?
It's a really good question. So I don't want to answer it with like, it depends. It kind of does based upon the model of an e-commerce store. Because with direct response marketing, right? There's like, you have the offer, you have a cart, you have this, maybe there's some upsells or order bumps. And it's a finite system. With an e-commerce store, you might have 3,000 products, or you might have 30, or you might have 4. So it's going to be a little different based upon how many products you have. That's kind of the key differentiator there. Or the maybe you've got jewelry, but it's all rings, but there's 47 variations of rings that you do, right? So that's, each sort of model has its own little metrics. But to your point, again, going back to that phrase we talked about earlier, the truth is in the trend, the power is in the pattern. My favorite part about measurement, this is the biggest lesson I've learned, is that I love how predictable people are. It is insane how predictable people are. This is how I know that if you were going to do an opt-in rate, cold traffic's going to be 25 to 35%. There are rare exceptions I get, but generally speaking, 25 to 35% on cold traffic. 40, if you're doing warm traffic, whether it's an email or affiliates or some retargeting stuff, 45 to 65% is going to be your opt-in rates. I just know it's what's going to be. It's how people are. Again, with rare exceptions. But the webinars have a similar framework. If you ever do webinars, you just know what the rate's going to be, what the show-up rate's going to be, what the purchase rate's going to be. With e-commerce stores, add to carts. Again, that is truly the thing you sort of measure for a little bit. And then you measure it by your product detail pages, what your add to cart rates are. Typically 35 to 40%, depending upon the product and how much shopping experience there is. Because again, if you're coming in to buy a ring and you've got 4 million variations of just the ring, your add to carts are going to be substantially lower than that. But if you have a choice between a ring and a necklace, your add to carts will be higher, on that particular product. So that's the only metric that's a little harder to pin down to a specific trend is the add to carts. But your checkout, once they're in checkout, now you're back to a finite system. So your checkout process is going to be your typical cart abandon rates, probably 35 to 45%, depending upon, again, the audience, how hot they are, what the offer is, et cetera. Because people that are coming back, a recurring customer, will have a higher percentage, make it through the checkout than a new customer. But those are the numbers that you can reliably predict and say, okay, for every product, and you won't have to measure it very long, measure it for a few weeks, depending upon your traffic. But you can measure for these and you can start to forecast and say, well, for our product, for every 100 page views of the product detail page, 15 of them, let's say, added to cart. So now there'll always be a range, right? Say 12 to 20 or 15 to 20% add to cart. So then you can start to say, well, if that's what's been happening, it's probably what will continue to happen next week. And you can predict that. And so now the marketing team's job is get 200 page views to this product detail page. And then we should see, 40 to 50 add to carts or whatever the percentages work out to. Then from there, how many of those add to carts to actually start the checkout process? How many of those actually finish, right? And that's where you'll start to see the add to carts will be uniquely different probably to the product pages, depending upon the store and how it's built. But everything else, you can start to see reliable, predictable patterns when it comes to that.
Yeah, so you're expecting most sites should be somewhere in the 35 to 45% of people who added the cart should complete the transaction. So anywhere between 1/3 to a little less than half of the people should follow through. So you could have 1/3 follow through and 2/3 cart abandonment.
Right. People that are starting checkout, exactly. And if they're not starting checkout, because that's a step,
different
right?
problem.
So 100% right. But you can measure for that, right? How many people added to cart and had no interest in going to checkout or viewing the cart? Like, that's an interesting thing. Why did they do that? And then you go, well, because it's an unexpected behavior, right? It's not, and it's important to think about the customer journey and not just in terms of like, oh, they're aware of our brand. No, this is important. They're aware of the brand, engage with the brand, and purchase from the brand. But how specifically should they journey through your store? Like going through our shoe store example before. I expect you to walk through the front door, not the back door where I'm loading stuff. I expect you to walk through the front door. I expect you to know kind of what you're looking for. I expect to be able to, that I'm going to have probably a few variations of that. I'm probably going to have it in your size. I expect all of these different things that have to happen in order for you to buy shoes and leave and hopefully come back and buy shoes later. So the same thing online. You have to have these expectations of what is the customer journey and get specific. So they want to, product detail page view. Okay, but what does that mean? Are they supposed to come in there and just click the button, add to cart? Well, no, they need to look at the product. What does that mean? Well, they need to look at the images. Okay, now we've got something we can start measuring for. Did they look at the images? Did they look at reviews? Did they investigate actually, virtually trying on the product, whatever the product is? Then did they add to cart? Then did those people actually view the cart or start the checkout, whatever that process is to start the checkout? Again, the beauty of a platform like Magento, highly customized. You're not locked into how everybody does their checkout process. You can create your own. And that's what's good about that, right?
Yeah, it allows you to differentiate yourself, especially 100%. If you're a retailer, so you don't offer the same shopping experience as everybody else who's also selling the same product because they're retailers.
And I'll tell you the other benefit, not to oversell Magento, because I know I don't have to do that for you, but branding, right? If you look like every other e-commerce store, just because you sell pencils and the other guy sells shoes and the other person sells rings, you still are kind of just a generic e-commerce store if the checkout process is the same over and over again. But when you've got something you can customize, you get the ability to brand your specific checkout, so it has its own look and feel, which is super important. And again, of course, measure for that to make sure it's working the way you want it to work.
And in Magento, we can see abandoned cart. So I can say from experience, let's say those who are more in the startup kind of phase, typically because Magento is more for the mid-sized market or the larger of the small businesses. So it's typically more a conversion of a brick and mortar store deciding to start to sell online. And those who are struggling to become successful, it's more a question of the add to cart step that is not happening, because if the people do add to cart, then and they abandon it, we have an abandoned cart report, and we can follow up with these guys and send automated email and so on, try to reactivate those carts. But that's what's missing. So let's say, what would you give as an advice to those stores went from brick and mortar to online, and they have some traffic, they have a Google ad campaign. There's maybe, I don't know, let's say 5,000 or 10,000, maybe more 5,000, let's say, visitors a month. They're just starting out, but they're not getting much add to cart. Like, what should they check?
So first, the assumption is that the product detail page views are happening, right? So let's assume that's happening.
Yeah, that's happening.
If they're not getting add to carts, this is the way that I would have it set up. Would be I would measure for the interactions, the engagement of the product detail pages, because otherwise we don't know why, right? We have to guess, and I'm not a fan of guessing. I'm not a fan of like, oh, well, my thinking is this, or somebody coming in looking at a thing and being like, oh, just change the button and then it's going to fix everything. Maybe, I don't know, but I would need to. We want to measure for the behaviors that are happening on the page. So if in that product detail page, measure them all separately, because you might find that one particular product that you're really good at selling has a really good add to cart rate. And you might find that one's got, and again, it's hard to answer this question because it's so generic, right?
It's very wide.
It's very wide. But let's say it's like a supplement store or something. And you realize like, oh, we've got 15 products. And as a company, we're having 2% add to carts. Really low. We should definitely have more of that. And then you break it out by product detail page and you go, oh, well, everybody's kind of 1 or 2 or 3%, but this one's like 40%. And you're like, okay, let's go look at that product detail page. What are those users doing on that page that is different, right? A different customer journey, different behavior than what's happening in other pages. And you might find like, oh, well, and maybe you're not even measuring the behaviors yet. In a perfect world, you're measuring these behaviors. Let's pretend you're not. And all you have is just page loaded and they didn't click a button. So
and they install Google Analytics. They have no clue what to do with it. Just the basic installation.
Right. So basic. So in that case, you are kind of forced to guess a little bit. But if you break it out by product detail page, so you know what specific products, are getting what specific add to carts, you're looking for, remember, truth is in the trend, power is in the pattern. In this case, you're looking for something that breaks the pattern, that says, oh, I'm actually getting, one of these products is getting really good add to carts. And you look at why is that? And you might see like, well, let's look at the differences. This one's got 4 images. This one only has 1 image. This one maybe had an ingredients snapshot of the bottle for the supplement that we were selling. This one didn't have that. We forgot to put that in there. It's like, okay, maybe that's what it is. Now, again, you don't know that for a fact. You'd have to essentially guess or split test your way into it. But you can absolutely set up your measurement so you would know very specifically, are they even clicking on those images or not, right? Before you, because that's where my uncomfortability, I wouldn't necessarily switch images out right away unless it was something obvious like that, where it's like one has 5 images and one has one, then you're like, okay, well, let's do more images because that's just probably good. There are standard best practices, right? The other thing to look at is the reviews of the page. And then you can set up some easier measurements like scroll. They're not that hard to set up, where you can just see, are people even scrolling down below the fold, or they investigate it at all, right? The other thing I would say is break it down by traffic source, because the traffic coming in has a different intention, right? So Facebook, if I'm advertising to a cold audience that I know wears shoes, so I'm going to advertise my shoe store on Facebook that I've got some deal. They were looking at cat pictures or whatever else. They are a distracted bunch. It's probably unlikely they're going to come in all of a sudden buy shoes from me from a brand they've never heard of, right? That's probably unlikely. So they're going to have a lower add to cart than an email that's retargeting me that says, hey, we've got 20% off and you bought from us 3 months ago. And so we're giving you this 20% off coupon. Sure. That sends them to a product detail page. I would expect that email, I would forecast that email would have a higher cart.
For sure, because your ad was not even on topic. Like they're looking at financials and CapEx and whatever, and you're just interrupting them what they're doing.
Right.
It's
they're not in the journey.
It's not even the right market to send the
exactly ad. Right. Yeah. But that's how I would do it. Is I would break it down, and maybe that's probably the simplest advice to give somebody is you don't look at your entire store and go like, well, I guess the store is broken, because the answer isn't in that aggregate. It's in the details. You have to break it down to specifics. So sort it out by product detail pages and see what the ad carts are for each one of those. And then sort it out by traffic source. And then look for something where there's a pattern break where it's like, oh, this is where the add to cart was really good. What are the conditions? Oh, it was email traffic to these specific products that was really good. Well, let's go look at the products and let's think about what was the email message? What was the expectation? Something we call the expectation engine. But it's like, what was the expectation that email set? Or what was the expectation that the Google Ads retargeting message set? Or that Facebook ad set prior to them making the click, right? What did they expect was going to happen prior to them making the click on the ad to come into the site? And then did that page match the expectation? So as an example, it might be something simple like you're advertising sweaters, you're retargeting sweaters on Facebook because they bought clothes from your store. Then they land on a page where it talks all about above the fold is a thing that talks about pants. That's going to hurt conversions because it's not matching the expectation that you set with the ad. There's the congruency isn't there yet. They have to think their way into it a little more. And so you can look for things like that. And again, the absolute best answer is you get good at measurement and then you can take out the guessing part of this. Because right now you are kind of guessing, but you're looking at basic patterns to see that it's kind of like if you have like I wear contacts, right? So if I have my contacts out, I can't see a ton. If I see some reading glasses that are not the right prescription, but they're better than what I am right now, I will use them, right? That's what you should do in measurement. So it's like, get at least good at breaking down things if that's all you have. But eventually you're going to want to get a better prescription for your glasses, right? You're going to want to get an eye doctor and improve things. Eventually you're going to want to improve your measurement because you will. It's just a very comfortable feeling when you know what the answer is. And you're not like, well, it could be this or this, let's try. Right. And that's what most people live in. They live in the world of try. You don't in guessing. And you don't have to if you can measure.
It's a good analogy. And it's which tool do you use to do all that tracking? Like did they scroll? Did they add to cart?
For us, it's pretty simple. It's all the Google stuff. So Google it's all free. It's Google Analytics. With any platform, you've got the platform needs to collect the information. It needs to store that information. Remember, information being behaviors. So it collects the behaviors happening on the site, stores those behaviors, and then it builds reports based on those behaviors. That's what your measurement system should do. A platform like Google Analytics does all three, where it collects information, right? The behaviors are happening like page views. It can then store those in its database, and then it builds the reports, which is, reports people are probably trying to use now in Google Analytics. But eventually, and that's a good place to start, eventually you will want to add on things like Google Tag Manager, because Google Tag Manager is built to do one thing, which is collect behaviors. It doesn't store them. It doesn't build reports. It just collects behaviors. But Tag Manager is what I would use to say, well, they go into my product detail view, and if they click on 3 different images in my product images for that product, I want you to tell Google Analytics that they now have an engagement score of 10. And I want you to go tell Facebook to put them in this retargeting group so that Facebook can start retargeting them. And that's what Tag Manager does. It collects the behaviors and then it tells other platforms what to do based on that. So that's where we add in Tag Manager. And then we add in Data Studio for reporting, because Google Analytics is good for reports, but it is kind of geeky and it's a lot of stuff. And a lot of times the answer you're looking for is in the middle of a bunch of other stuff. And it's hard to get the answer sometimes. So with Data Studio, it is built to do one thing, which is report. It doesn't collect and it doesn't store the information. You connect Data Studio into other things like Google Analytics, And then it builds the reports that display the answers that you want to see so you can take the actions you want to take. So that's how we tie all three of those together. We use Tag Manager to collect the behaviors. We use Google Analytics to store those behaviors. We use Google Data Studio to build reports that kind of work like a car dashboard. Like when you look at your car and you see your speedometer, you know immediately, do I hit the gas or do I hit the brake? You don't have to think about it. You don't have to analyze it. You don't have to have a committee to figure out what this means, right? You don't need to use your regression analysis. You just look at it and you go, cool, I hit the gas or I hit the brake based upon the information. You can build marketers' dashboards need to be that simple. And you can absolutely do that with a platform like Data Studio. So you see, oh, my opt-in rate is off on Facebook. I need to go adjust this piece of it. And then you adjust the piece of it. And then you see the opt-in rate comes back. Like, great. Like that, it can really be that boring, which is what I like about it. It takes all the drama out.
Really good, really good. And let's say you're going a bit against the conventional wisdom to sort of take a stance against the customer average lifetime value. So because that's typically one of the big ones, they say measure your customer lifetime value.
Yep.
And for e-commerce, it's typically part of the key KPIs, key performance indicator, along with, let's say, average order value. And then you may have a few other of your choice. Of course, the top line, like the sales per month. You may have a few more, like of course your conversion rate and your return on ad spend, or how much does it cost you to acquire one customer, and so on. Like, what are your key metrics that you would measure for an e-commerce store?
So for an e-commerce store, again, I would start with the basics, which is results and how. So I would literally follow that same plan. So what are the results I need to measure for? Right, the results I'm trying to achieve would be number of sales. You do need to know average cart, right? So the obvious ones, like you just mentioned, it would be number of sales, average cart, how many times a buyer is coming back if they're buying. The difference on my version of what LTV, why I rail against LTV, because I don't like LTV as a metric, because it's misused and it's like everybody I've talked to, I speak a lot on stages and I speak with speakers who are talking about LTV. And I'm like, do you know what your LTV is? And they're like, because they don't know. It's so hard to figure it out because it's constantly changing every day. And in reality, the problem is nobody ever asked, wait, should we even think, what are we asking? Why, how would we use this? No one's ever questioned it. And they just keep repeating it, right? Over and over again. And so that's what I think is happening. And
so it's often grossly just simplified and averaged out, let's say for the month, and they don't do it like daily, so they don't have that fluctuation with it.
Right. But all you need to do, the spirit of LTV is correct. You need to know how much a customer is worth. The only thing you need to make sure is that you tie it to a time, right? So what is the customer worth here, and here? So what is a customer is, so as an example for LTV, we talked about it before, is that what we call velocity of return, right? We renamed LTV to keep that conversation because we don't want to start with a misconceived notion of what LTV is. People always think they know. But velocity return, day 0 is what my LTV is here. At 7 days, they are worth this. At 14 days or 30 days or 60 days, they're worth this, right? And then the same thing back to your number of times that they're coming back to buy, depending upon the business model. Obviously, some are not going to have that. But if you have a recurring subscription, you need to know that. Like, how many times is this product going to, how many times when they buy the first time, should they end up being rebilled? And did that happen? So, but it'd be over a shorter period of time, 90 days, 6 months, whatever the thing is that you measure against, but you have to associate it to time. Always make sure you have that time element. Don't trick yourself and think, because again, think about, if I have $1 million LTV and I go on average, every customer, on average, I take out all my revenue as a company. I take out all the customers of my company. I divide those two numbers out. I come up with $1 million LTV. And I go, great. Well, now I can go spend $350,000 for every customer by the logic that people use. The problem is when you go into the numbers and you realize like one person bought $100 million worth of stuff. So it totally skewed everything.
Yeah. Average is never great. You need
average is horrible.
Some more fancy metrics than that will calculate out the extremes of the bell curve.
And if you did an LTV over time, you would see that. You would never see that 100 million person purchase.
That's why people often talk also about median instead of average. So that's what's the sample straight in the middle.
Right in the middle. Yep.
Exactly right. So which might be far from the average. That was
exactly
the sample straight in the middle.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. But you associate it to time. That's the most important part, is tie it to a time. And then so that's sort of the result side of things. And then it's the how steps. It really is. It's levels of how. So in the beginning, if you're not measuring anything at all, you got to, what we call, you're in the cave, right? You're wandering around in the dark, not quite sure what's working, what's not. Your job is to find a flashlight and get the heck out of the cave. Like just get a basic setup in place that lights up page views, turn on that integration with Magento, whatever it is, that lights up stuff. So you know how many people are entering the store, which product detail pages are they seeing, how many people started the checkout process, how many people finished the checkout process, right? Those are the basic house steps. But then as soon as you have that, you will want to get more detailed. And that's where we call the eyes on the journey report, where it might be a product detail page that you've created a report that shows you, well, in this product detail page, here's how many people actually loaded the page. But that was just the first step. Here's how many people were there 10 seconds later. Here's how many people scrolled and showed interest in the product. Here's how many people actually investigated the offer for the product. Here's how many people added to the cart. Here's how many people of those viewed their cart to check the checkout, right? And now you've got a level of detail that's a more, think about prescription of glasses, a better prescription of glasses now. And then it keeps going from there. You'll ask bigger questions as you start getting, like when you climb a mountain, you see the next mountaintop, like, oh, let's climb that one too. And that's what'll happen with questions like that. So, but that'll get you started. What I don't want to make sure that anybody that's just starting out, I want to emphasize this, get good enough to get going. Then you come back and make it better later. Do not try to do a measurement setup from day zero when you have nothing in place right now. Do not say, well, we're going to set our measurements so that we see, because this image thing, that sounded great. Let's make sure we're measuring for images and we're measuring for button clicks and we're measuring for scroll and time. And did they see their reviews for 15 seconds? I want all of that. That sounds great. Sounds great to me too. But if you try to do that without understanding and having the foundations in place, it will take you a massive amount of time. And you will get to the point where everyone will be like, this is just a bunch of busy work and we're not getting any progress. So let's just scrap this. And that's a big challenge with measurement, is people will try to do too much because they hear what's possible. So they think, oh, I need to build, what we call the summit style. We have three levels of measurement. There's the cave, where your job is like, I have no idea what's going on. So I just need to get out of the cave so I see some light, right? Get some visibility to things. That's when you're in the valley of visibility at that point. And it's where most people stay for a long period of time as they learn measurement, they learn strategy, they learn what to do with the numbers and all of that. And then you have the summit style. So summits are like where you're going to mountaintop to mountaintop to mountaintop. They are complicated setups. There's multiple data sources coming in and you're doing data lakes and data warehousing and things like that. It's more complicated to get the answers. But the reason that it's easy to get them up here is because you've gone through the cave, because you've gone through the valley. Yep. Now the mountaintop's easier to scale.
You're building up on it.
100% right.
Yeah, you need to. Otherwise, you'll overbuild some stuff. It won't be used. You won't understand, or you build from assumption that we're not tested. So you waste a lot of work and budget. So I think we've covered pretty widely this topic. It's very good. Is there anything, any last idea that you want to bring for the audience?
I think at the risk of overwhelming everybody, I will say just pick one thing. We do this a lot with our trainings. We focus on this one thing concept. So anything you've heard in this podcast, when it was like that one thing that was either you heard it in a slightly different way where it made sense this time, or there's one actionable step that you're like, oh, we're going to get better at our planning. Pick one thing, then come in and practice that, build it as a skill, right? Because right now you've been exposed to a bunch of new information and ideas, but you don't have a skill yet. So practice some of this, then come back and I would listen to this podcast again or rewatch it. And then you will pick up another new one thing because you're going to hear something else different. And that's how I would build this, as opposed to, oh, here's 14 things we're going to do, because it's too much and you'll get overwhelmed and people will start going like, why are we doing this? We're not even getting anything from it yet. Those dashboards we're working on dashboards for 13 weeks now. We still don't have a number. So to avoid all that, just one thing at a time, get it good enough to get going, then come back and make it better.
Yeah, that's inspiring. Actually, I feel like going to work on my marketing metrics now.
That's perfect.
So,
Mission accomplished.
Yay, there you go. All right. So if someone wants to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
Absolutely. So measurementmarketing.io is our website. So we train companies how to think about measurement and how to use these different tools. So measurementmarketing.io is a good, obvious choice. I mentioned the measurement platform they have, the Measurement Marketing Academy, that does train people how to do this. But we do have a free version of that, what we call the Toolbox. That has weekly training, so you can kind of get your feet wet a little bit and learn about some of this stuff. And it's got a ton of tools to help people with measurement, including traffic tracking toolkits. There's a dashboard planner back there to help you with that. There's a optimization pipeline planner for planning out split tests and measuring for all of those. There's a lot of cool stuff that's back there, regardless of your skill, whether you're just starting out or if you've got some experience. The Toolbox is what I would probably recommend to get started with. And if you go to measurementmarketing.io/e-commerce wizards, you will see that. So measurementmarketing.io/e-commerce wizards will take you directly to the Toolbox.
All right. Awesome. Thank you for being here today, Mercer.
Pleasure. Thanks again, Guillaume. Appreciate you having me.